is. I'm going to be teaching this class for the next quarter. I got material together, got material ready, but just for this weekend, I actually have a workbook that I purchased. Actually, it's in a PDF format. It was kind of pricey, but it's for congregational use. So we have the license to print them, to make copies. I'm just hoping that maybe there's somebody in the congregation here who might be good at printing stuff. That might be able to make little booklets for sometime. We can certainly give reimbursement for that, but hopefully I'll be able to find somebody that I can get together with, and we can see about just binding something so that each of us will have a workbook to use. The Book of Revelation, and this is why I think that the Revelation is a good springboard for this next series that we'll be discussing today. Just an aside, I was thinking back all the Bible classes that I've taught since I started worshiping here. Actually, outside of maybe kids classes or maybe a class here or there, I really didn't teach Bible classes on a regular basis until I started worshiping here at Morris Road. And I was thinking about the lessons that I used to do in the past, and I've never used a workbook. I've never used like something that has already been printed. Some thoughts, ideas on a certain subject. But most of the classes that I've taught here have really just been you get a book out of the Bible and we just study that. I don't think that we've ever did topical studies, but that's exactly what we're going to do. And on this on the subject of topics, I want to use the Book of Revelation again as our springboard. We talked about themes concerning the book of Revelation. If you would open your Bibles to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. What was the purpose? What would you say is the purpose, or maybe not the purpose, or a purpose for the writing of this book in Revelation? A purpose for these first century Christians of whom it is written. To encourage them to remain faithful. Yes. And why?
Because they will receive their reward high for.
Yes, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Good morning. We're in Revelation chapter 2, and no, we didn't start over. Look at Revelation chapter 2 in verse 11. Actually, start at verse 7. The Lord Jesus says to the church in Ephesus, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God." Drop down to verse 11, to the church of Smyrna. "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death." Drop down to verse 17, to the church of Pergamum. "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give him some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows about, but he who receives it. He who will not be hurt by the second death." The one that's going to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God, is given Are there things in this life that we have to overcome? sort of things in this life do we have to overcome? Temptation. Temptation. What else?
Just regular life, diseases, loss of family, friends.
Yeah, that's right. Things in this world that we have to overcome. 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5 says, "For whatever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith." Who is the one who overcomes the world? But he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. We have a whole world of things to overcome. We just touch on just a few things. I'm sure if we sat here all morning and thought about it, there's going to be a lot of things as Christians that we are going to have to overcome. That we need encouragement to overcome. And we have to overcome. The blessings that were promised by the Lord Jesus for those in these churches that were going to have to overcome so much persecution. So, what was it? Sister Katie mentioned temptation. Do you think that it was a temptation for these first century Christians to just throw in the towel? Think about all. It was a temptation for them to say, "That's it. I quit. I give in. This is just too much for me. This is too hard for me. This is too difficult for me. If I continue in the faith, this might cost me my life. This might cost me my faith. This might cost me much." I don't know if anybody has had an opportunity to read something like the Fox's Book of Martyrs, and the things that the brethren in the first century had to go through or went through because of their faith. Be strong, overcome. Encouragement to overcome. These Christians that were put in the middle of a cheering. Everybody just hooping and hollering, having a great time. Because they see. Was there much that these first century Christians had to overcome? We have to overcome too. We have to overcome too because if we expect to receive the promises from the Lord Jesus, the promises that Christians are given all the way from the first century, we're going to have to overcome. There are many things that we're going to have to overcome, and a reason why that we have to overcome, because if we don't overcome things in this world, the things in this world will overcome us. That is a biblical principle. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 21 says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." In 2 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 19, Peter's talking about false teachers that are in sin. He says in verse 19 of 2 Peter chapter 2, "Promising them freedom while they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by what a man is overcome, by this he is enslaved. For if, after they have escaped the defilements of the world by the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and are overcome. And the last state has become worse for them than the first." And this is why it's important for us to overcome the world, because if we don't overcome the world, then the world is going to overcome us. You have world of things that we have to overcome, a whole world of sin that we have to overcome. And if we don't, guess what the world of sin is going to do to you? It's going to overcome you, and it's going to enslave you. It's going to enslave you. Which brings us to the topic of this lesson series, overcoming sin. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about the subject is how imperative it is for us to overcome sin. Because as the Bible tells us, if we don't overcome sin, then sin is going to overcome us and cause us to lose our souls. This is serious business. It is serious. We're studying it in the book of Exodus right now, in our Take 7 at 7 Bible reading. About the judgments and the covenant and the laws and the regulations that the Lord is given to his people. All sorts of things, not only judgments, but concerning what to do about people who are caught up in sin. And we might look at how the Lord instructs people, how to deal with people who do things like talk back to their parents. What to do about kids, and I'm not talking about little kids that doesn't know any better, older children that ought to know enough that they will do such a thing as strike the parents. For these kids, it was instructed for them to take them outside of the camp and kill them. We might think, wow, that's a little heavy-handed. And it's not just that. It's things like homosexual behavior, bestiality, all these different sort of sins. The Lord is saying, you take these folks out of the camp and you stone them. You kill them. You utterly destroy them. That the Lord takes sin seriously. And He doesn't tolerate it. We have a degree of which we tolerate things, but we live in a culture today that talks a whole lot about tolerance. Those of us that are old enough to remember when thrown around concerning all sorts of sinful behavior, whatever it is. But over time, what does that turn into? What does tolerance turn into? Do we tolerate a cold? We get a cold, we get sick, but you know what? We tolerate it. Do we like it? No, but we tolerate it. But what does tolerance turn into over time? Acceptance and moreover celebration. Celebration. The Lord doesn't tolerate sin. The Lord is gracious to forgive us of our sin. But the Lord takes sin very, very seriously. Because sin is what separates God's people from Himself. God is perfect. He is perfect in power. He is perfect in righteousness. He is perfect in purity. And for a being that is perfectly pure, any sort of impurity in comparison is exceedingly impure. I told this story, but there was a girl she lived in a farmhouse, and out in the farmhouse during the spring and summer months, she looked out on the sheep out on the pasture, and the sheep were grazing in the grass, and she looked at the sheep, and she just remarked about how white and clean looking these sheep were. But once the winter fell on the ground, and then the sheep were taken out in the pasture, she looked at the sheep, and then she noticed how gray and dingy they looked in comparison. And again, there may be a certain level of sin that we have learned to tolerate, but God, who is perfectly pure, any impurity is exceedingly impure. He takes sin very, very seriously. So we're gonna talk about sin. We're gonna talk about how serious it is. We're gonna talk about the nature of it. And then we're going to move on and talk about specific sins. And we're going to talk about what the Bible has to say about these specific sins, and what the Bible has to say in order to overcome specific sins. I have printed off the first chapter of our workbook, and like I said, hopefully sometime in the very near future we're going to get workbooks for everybody. But I'm going to go ahead and pass these out to everybody. I think I got 14 or 15. I think that should be enough to cover everybody here this morning. But this is going to be the section of this lesson series, Overcoming Sin. Oh, thank you. And like I mentioned, this is the first time that I prepared material in order to teach a class. So this is going to be an experience for me. It's going to be a growth experience. So if my lessons seem a little bit disjointed, I just hope that you give me a little bit of grace and we'll study this together. Go ahead and open up to the introduction section. In 1 John chapter 3, in verse 4, the author references here, what is sin? What is sin? Transgression against God's law. When I'm thinking about God's law, I mean, really, now that we are in the book of Exodus, and God's law is the law of the Lord, the law of Moses, of course, is being given to the people, and the people are expected to be obedient to these things, regardless of situation. They're expected to be obedient to these things. And if they are not obedient to these things, then some punishments or ramifications are given along with these laws that the Lord gives. But the point is, and I underline it here in the introduction, because laws, we have sinned. that is sin. That is sin. And what do we tend to do about sin? What do we tend to do with sin? In order to make sin sometimes more palatable for us, or palatable to our society, to our culture, with sin.
We make comparisons. We'll compare big sins and little sins, and compare it to how common it is.
Yes.
To justify it or make it smaller in our minds.
Yes. Yes, that's right. In fact, Molly was watching a TV show and something with a pig, I think. I don't know. And the subject was on lying, and somebody mentioned, well, there's difference in lying, and there's big lies that people tell, and then there's the little lies. They call them the little white lies, and the whole and I mean, this is a show designed for small children, but this is a premise. This is a thought that us adults we have a difficult time understanding that a lie is a lie, no matter how big or how small it is. Brother Adam,
people will change definitions, start defining words and ideas in different ways to change what it means.
Yes, you're right. People who call good evil and evil good just by changing the word. Is language important? Language is important. We're looking at in our culture that's changing language as we know it in order to make sinful activities more palatable. You look at it in the political sphere when oftentimes when politicians are talking about women's rights. What are they talking about? Abortion. It's abortion. What do you think they're talking about? The suffrage movement? No. They're talking about abortion. When folks are talking about, of course, when I was growing up, it was alternative lifestyles and things of that nature. There was a commercial on the television. I tell you, you can hardly just watch television commercials these days, and not get away from this sort of exposure. But I don't even understand the subject matter of the commercial. But it was all about love and what is love, and then they had these people, behind. It was almost like an X-ray machine. And you see in the front, you're seeing two skeletons. These two skeletons, they come together and they're kissing, right? And then you give it a minute, and they come from behind the screen, and it's two women. Well, is that love? Is that the Bible definition of love? I think as a society and a culture, we've just completely lost the definition of love. And what love is. That's why language is supremely important. But why is it, look at that second paragraph there in the introduction. Why is it that sin and the subject matter of sin is so important for us to talk about? What does it do? It separates us from God. That's Isaiah chapter 59 in verse 2. Sin separates us from God. God expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden for eating some fruit. And it wasn't just any fruit. It was fruit that God said, do not eat it, or you will die. Sometimes I wonder if they fully understood the implication of that. Not only did they die physically, they died spiritually too. Separated from that perfect relationship, that perfect union with God when they walked with God. Deborah?
That's another word that I think that has been watered down, is die. With all the video games, when they get another life and another life and another life, I don't think young people know when you're dead, you're dead. They think it's going to be, another life. They're coming back next time.
Oh, sure.
I think it's been watered down.
Well, in a way, it seems like death, the whole idea of death, I say in a way, it's been watered down in the sense that, when other people are dying, it really doesn't hit folks as much as it does when somebody close to them dies. A lot of people, or how about the subject matter of their own death? The subject matter of people's own death is very uncomfortable for a lot of folks. And it's uncomfortable for folks because they know in their conscience that there is an end that they are going to have to deal with. Katie.
So many people today also, I would say the majority of the population believes that everybody's going to heaven.
Yes. As long as you don't kill anybody, as long as you're not.
I've heard any exceptions. I've just heard so many people comment that, and me and Troy just had this discussion yesterday about dying and what happens after you die. Just so many people are taught and believe it doesn't matter. As long as you believe in God, you're going to heaven.
Right. Well, I was looking at a church over in Reno, and I was looking at their belief statements, and one of the things that struck me in line with what they taught was that forgiveness is unconditional. And I thought, what? Where does it teach that forgiveness is unconditional? If forgiveness is unconditional, then what's the point in us having all of these pages and all of these words for us to follow? There's no reason for us to have any of this because really, if forgiveness is unconditional, then we're all saved. And there's no reason for us to examine sin. There's no reason for us to examine God's will for us. There's no reason for us to examine any sort of negative ramifications to our lifestyle. So, I want us to take a look at the table of contents. This is going to be the subject matters that we're going to be talking about. And like I said, to cover a chapter each week. To cover a chapter each week. So this is going to take us maybe just a little bit longer than a quarter. We're going to talk about the nature of sin, why it is necessary for us to overcome sin, and then we're going to talk about sin in the specific senses. The lust of the flesh, pride, anger, worry, covetousness, covetousness, hypocrisy, gossip, fear, prejudice, being unforgiving, and being indifferent to God's will. We're going to be talking about all of these things, Lord willing. So why don't we dive in? Nature of sin. We're going to talk about the nature of sin, and the author here he talks about dogs, and he says it's important for us to know the potential dangers of things to which we are exposed, and he talked about taking a look at getting a dog and doing the research about the different breeds of dogs, and see what their disposition is, how they act. And I might even have dogs today, and we look back and think, I wish I had done more research on this breed, because this breed is awful. And they're very disobedient. But what about the sort of breeds that have been known to bite people's faces off? And I think we all know what we're talking about. Now, I know a lot of folks that get really sensitive about this subject, because some people are just great dog lovers, and I can appreciate that. But I tell you what, you take a look at the news, and you see about another death because of a dog attack and a dog mauling. Do we really have to look at the breed of dog to get an idea of what it was? I can rest assured, if I'm reading an article about somebody getting their face bitten off, I'm not going to be reading about a Chihuahua. I have a Chihuahua. I know that there are some Chihuahuas that are pretty vicious, but none of them are biting people's faces off. There are certain breeds that we know have a tendency, maybe not a tendency, but have a what's that?
Capability.
Have a certain capability of hurting folks, of destroying folks. And I know that we're talking about pit bulls. Pit bulls, maybe to some degree. Like when I was growing up, the whole thing was Dobermans. Oh, you got a Doberman, you got a mean dog. These days, it's pit bulls. We know that there are certain breeds, and I know that there are folks that say, "Well, I own pit bulls. I love pit bulls. They're so nice. They're so friendly." It's all in their and how they're brought up. We know that there are some breeds of animals that something just goes off in their head where they don't act right. We say, well, they're not acting right. There are certain breeds that were bred in the past for the purposes of war. Pit bulls were what sort of breed? Are there certain breeds that I'll stay away from? We'd all do well to be wise to consider these things. But the whole point of it is that we look at the nature of things before we bring it into our home. We look at the nature of sin and what it has the capability of doing. Would it be wise for us to bring it in? Yes, some breeds will bite your face off, but you know what? Sin, when we look at it for what it does, and ultimately what it does to the souls of folks, are far more dangerous. It's just Janice and Brother Adam.
And when we even dive in deeper of the nature of sin, we know that there's no big sin and little sin in God's eyes, but there is sin that will do more catastrophic damage
Yes.
in your life than other sin was. So it reminded me when you were talking about little Chihuahua or a Cocker Spaniel, they have a history. Last time I checked, to bite more than pit bulls, but pit bulls, they have
But, of course, the author here is bringing up dogs. Now, maybe in this life, there are some sins that have greater consequences than other sin. But all sin separates us from God. No matter how big or small. Yes, the ramifications, the problems that we have to deal with because of sin in this life vary. But if we don't find forgiveness for even the small sins in our life, we're going to have problems. We're going to have problems in the next. Brother Adam and Brother Ross.
I think it's good to discuss the nature of sin like this and all the sort of things, because it's easy to, like, as a Christian, I'm not going to say it becomes easier, but there's a lot of things that you can say, okay, well, I need to avoid these certain things, and it makes it a whole, like when I became a Christian, before that, I had a pretty rough. I was always, it's like always fighting against the grain, always going upstream. When I became a Christian, my lifestyle choices changed, and so it eliminated a lot of problems right off the bat, because I was understanding the nature of sin, the consequences of it. It reminded me, you're talking about the dogs of this documentary, a while back, Grizzly Man. This guy would go up every year in the summertime to Alaska and hang out with the grizzly bears. Let you guess on how the documentary ended. Of course, the man was up there and was eaten by the grizzly bears one summer. But it's like those kind of things. You don't go play with grizzly bears. You understand the nature of these things. It's a danger. There's a danger there that we can't control.
Yeah.
So we get in. You get involved with these things. You open up Pandora's box, so to speak.
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to close it back up.
And why did the bear? It's a bear. You approach them in a certain way. If you handle them in a certain way, at the end you think, who told you that? The bears?
There for years, doing
right?
Oh, it's fine. They know me.
Yeah, sure. They know you. Know you as a burrito, maybe. Brother Ross.
One of the simplest illustrations I've seen about it is this is how we see the city skyline, with different heights of buildings, and some tall, some small. This is how God sees sin, and all it is just a straight line.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is
Oh! I actually had a. Who deserves to go to hell? Who deserves to go to hell? And on one end of the bar graph, it was the little white lies. On the other end, it's mass murder. And you ask folks, well, who deserves to go to hell? Well, it's everybody, on this upper end. On this upper end. But how does God say who deserves to go to hell? Well, everybody. We look at Revelation. We talked about the lake of fire. Who's going there? It said all liars. All liars. So it's important for us to talk about the nature, the characteristics, the qualities, the dispositions, and the tendencies. So the first disposition that I want to talk about this morning, that sin is deceptive. the Bible warns us of the fact that sin, of course, is deceitful. Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 13. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Through the deceitfulness of sin. This word deceitfulness, it comes from the Greek word apate. Apate. And I found it interesting to the Greeks. To the Greeks, apate was the goddess of trickery. She was the goddess of lies and fraud and deception. This is where we get the word, the Greek word apate from. Deceitfulness. So one thing that we have to remember here is that sin is deceptive, and I underlined this section because it was so pointed. Sin is not truthful with us. Sin doesn't tell you about consequences. Oftentimes, sin will tell you that there are no consequences. We're going to talk about that, Brother Adam. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I really like the idea of, if you've ever been on a set of a film or a movie or something like that, thinking of, all of the facades, and to actually see what it is. It's just 2/3 of a room, or half of a room, where you only see certain angles of it, and everything else is just empty. All the props, they're just added props, and it's all fake things, but it looks appealing. It looks like how we would envision things to look. And that's how sin is a lot of times. We see Hollywood and the glamour of it and those things, but it's really what goes on behind the scenes. If you think of Hollywood, it's the same kind of thing, which is it's just empty. It looks real and appealing and full, but in reality, it's just empty.
Yes, it presents to you something that is desirable, something that is entertaining. Some years ago, yes, I was on television. No, I was actually on a show on HGTV. No, I really was. This news actually might be new to my kids. Some years ago, I was on a TV show. It wasn't Love It or List It. It was it was a show similar to that, and you can tell it's been that long ago since I was on it. I already forgot the name of it, but if I thought about it, come back. But the whole premise of the show was that there was some houses on the market. Sleep On It. That was the name of the show. And there were some houses on the market, and realtors would take these prospective buyers to the houses that they were interested in. And what they would have to do is live in that house for a night. Which is the whole idea, which is sleep on it, and to try to get an idea of whether or not they want to buy it. And so I was on this show, and one of the houses had some high tension power lines behind it, some high voltage power lines, and I was out there doing some measurements, because the potential buyers, according to the show, they were interested. They were thinking about buying the house. But the producers of the show told me, yeah, we got to kind of act like the buyers are still interested in the house, and they're not sure, but they've already bought the house. They've already put in an offer on the house. So I'm thinking, lies. Whenever you're watching these reality TV shows, let me tell you from firsthand experience, these shows are everything but real. These shows are designed to keep you entertained, to keep your eyes on that television, and they will lie to you, and it will be deceiving to you. You watch a television show, and you'd have no idea, and it was so weird to see these people just act like oh, I don't know if I want to buy this house with these power lines behind it, when in reality they've already put in an offer on the house. Television is a lot like sin. I'm glad Brother Adam brought that up, because it is in the nature of sin to deceive us, to trick us, to make us believe that there is something good to be had from sin. Now, we spent a lot of time today getting into an introduction. We just touched on the first chapter. Next weekend I'm going to be out of town. Next weekend in the morning. But Lord willing, we'll be back next Sunday evening. Brother Adam is going to be covering for me. I don't know if he has something else in store for you, a different subject, or if you may continue his prayer study. Or Brother Adam, you're welcome to continue to talk about the subject of sin. I got all the. See, again, prepared material. First time I'm teaching a class from prepared materials. It's already there for you. But I thank you for your attention. I hope that we'll all look forward to talking more about the subject of sin, because I'm very interested in talking about these specific sins that we're going to be discussing, and how as God's people we're going to overcome them, because again, if we don't overcome these things are going to overcome us.